Hi everybody. Thank you for listening to this week's sermon that didn't get preached, but we'll do our best to try to do it in a fireside chat. How's that? Just please don't accuse me of phoning it in. Yes, I'm recording this on my phone, but I'm not phoning it in. Well, I had planned to begin this sermon on Sunday with a little bit of exchange, some interaction. I was going to ask you to share with each other some of the most memorable first lines of stories or books that you have read. But since we can't do that, I looked up a few myself, and I'm going to share them with you. I'll tell you where some of them came from, and others, you'll have to look them up. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I'll bet most of you know that one. Then here's one you may remember. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. How about this one? Actually, this is from Alice Walker. It's the first line in her amazing book, The Color Purple. You better never tell nobody but God. How about this one? When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. And finally, I'll bet a lot of the young people know this one. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. I hope everybody knows this one. In the beginning, God. So how about this one? This is a new one that's never been written in a book before. But listen to this one. She was just a girl who liked music. What do you think about that as an opening line for a good story? Does it make you want more? Does it make you want to read more or hear more? Well, she was just a girl who liked music. Her mother noticed that when she listened to the phonograph, the brand new little record player that she received for Christmas when she was about 5 years old, she would keep time by patting her knee. Oh, and she would sing. She picked up songs from the radio, and at church, she sang and sang and sang. There wasn't a lot of money, but the girl's parents wanted to encourage her. They could see that music was deep in her soul, so they sought to encourage her musically. Her mother took her to a local teacher who had a great reputation, and she was tested. The teacher said she had ability, and she could possibly be a musician. So she would play the piano. Determined to find a way out of what seemed to be no way, her mother went in search of a good used piano and found a well-loved old upright for $25. It cost as much to move it as it did to buy it, but it found a home in the family's basement, and the girl began lessons at age 7 or maybe it was 8. I don't remember much about those first couple of years of lessons, but I do remember Marion Schmidt. She was the church organist who trusted me enough to ask me to substitute for her the summer that I was 11 years old. She wanted to take a month off for vacation, not having had a vacation for several years, and I was just a girl who liked music. And Marion just wanted a vacation. But that summer, when I was 12, after that whole year of organ lessons, it changed my life. It gave my love of music a purpose and deep meaning. It made my love of music part of God's story. I think that if I was going to write the story of my life, the chapter that I just read for you might be called Music Lessons. It was a chapter that started out simply as a time of learning more about something that I deeply loved. It could have been about almost anything, and though it didn't start out to be anything more than exploring a love of music, I look back on that time in my life and now I can see how God's hand was at work, shaping me to be a teacher as I learned myself, and even shaping me to be a pastor. I had no idea, and neither did my parents. It wasn't dramatic. It was just what we did. There's no doubt in my mind now that God was in it from the very start. Do you remember Chuck Thompson? Chuck was the voice of the Baltimore Colts for a long time, but I knew him as the voice of the Orioles and then as a member of my congregation. Chuck came to church regularly, but he wasn't what I think most of us would call religious. We always heard him say, "Ain't the beer cold?" And when a particularly exciting play happened on the field, he would get all excited and he'd say, "Go to war, Miss Agnes!" Chuck had this beautiful, resonant voice, one that was immediately recognizable and could have been called a radio voice, I guess, because of its beauty. You know what Chuck said about his voice and his resulting career? He would say, and I heard him say publicly many times, that he was deeply blessed and that the gift God gave him in his voice was the reason that he was truly successful in his life. Over and over and over, I heard Chuck Thompson give God credit for his great life in radio. Chuck saw himself in God's story. So what about you? You have rich stories too. There are stories of how you moved into your life's vocation, stories of how you met your spouse or moved to a new home, or maybe even to a new town. Stories of those who have loved you or who challenged you or maybe somewhat surprisingly took an interest in you and made your life different, richer, fuller, deeper meaning. Stories of loss, stories of sorrow, stories of joy and exhilaration, stories of your life. Right now, I'd like for you to pick a time of your life. Got it? Now give that chapter a title. It might be the time that you succeeded at something important to you, or a time when you didn't succeed. Jot the title of your chapter on the sermon brief page that was attached to this email. Another chapter in my own life might be entitled "A New Wind is Blowing." That's the chapter when Terry Ray Chatton moved into our home and became a member of our family. She moved into our son Dennis's room, and there's just something about those little toy soldiers that were all around on the wallpaper border of that room that gave that time in our lives, at least special meaning. My deep friendship with Terry Ray is filled with God experiences. God's fingers are all over that friendship story. I wouldn't even have to think very hard to trace how God is in that story. Okay, now jot down another chapter in your life. What was going on? And what will you name that chapter? Another chapter for me might be The Big C. I lost 2 of my grandfathers to cancer. And now we're facing cancer again with Glenn, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, our beloved brother. That chapter will be full of sadness and anger, as well as filled with how God walked with us through every one of those struggles. So now's the time for us to share with each other. As we planned for this series, we wanted we wanted to find ways for you to engage with the study, whether you were in a small group or not. I hope that you are all using the book that we bought for all the families to use it as a devotional. And if you haven't started already, today's not too late. You can pick up your book on Sunday. And even if you're not in a small group, we want you to have an opportunity each week to share little snippets of your own stories, our God stories, during worship. There are two ways for you to share. During worship on Sunday, you can tweet on your phone, or you could do that right now. You can use your phone, and for those of you who are electronically savvy, and use the Twitter account that I set up just for this. The Twitter handle is @RUMC1777, and the particular group of stories is #MyGodStoryRUMC. For those of you who don't want to tweet electronically, you can email during today's sermon by the fireside, or during worship you can take a tweet card out of the pew rack in front of you and just write it down and hand it to an usher. They'll be ready to take your tweets, and will be looking for you to just hold up the card in the middle of the sermon. You may be surprised to know that I haven't completely lost my mind. I can see that there's quite a bit of activity going on in the sanctuary while I'm preaching or while worship is going on. So why not use technology for a great purpose during our worship services? So now's your chance to share. Either tweet or write your chapter name. If you want to add a little bit about the content or the characters in your story, you can do that too. If you're using a card, just hold it up on Sunday, or just email it right now if you want. And on Sundays, an usher will come and get it, or just email it to me at the church office or at my email account, which is on it's on the church website. Just RUMCoffice1777@gmail.com or pastorvivianmc@gmail.com, and we'll publish some of those as we go along. When I think over the chapters of my own life, over what's already happened, places where I already see God's hand at work, feel God's presence, I am overcome with gratitude and with joy. Looking over those dark times of sorrow or fear, I can see how God walked me through it and worked through it as well. I feel secure or comforted. Looking back over times of joy or exhilaration or success, the gratitude I feel is almost indescribable. Seeing the success of a child I had the opportunity to teach, finding my path in life, the births of our children, those quiet, intimate times when I could feel my love for Rich grow deeper and stronger. In each and every time, I see God's influence and feel God's encouragement, and I am deeply grateful. How about you? In the beginning, a great introduction to the greatest story ever told. The introduction to the most important character in that story and in the story of God's people, God and God with us, Jesus. Have you ever noticed that in a story that begins with nothing, God speaks? Just as humans do, God speaks out of purpose, purposefully seeking relationship with each and every one of us, with me and with you. So today, as we begin at the beginning of the God story, our God stories, there are two questions that I hope will ring in your hearts and minds today and throughout this week, and indeed throughout all the weeks of Lent. First, what do you think God is saying to you right now? And secondly, What do you need to say to God? And I hope you'll take the time to answer.